Unsolved.
The Zodiac Killer case. Paul Reuther Von Hafften.
Finding one psychopath in this city could be a tall order. This latest communication from the killer who calls himself Zodiac adds very little substantially to the case.
The first stop that Paul Stine stopped at was Washington and Maple at 3778 Washington Street. And the people that lived there previous to this were Leon and Madeline Russell, their daughter Alice, their son Charles, and Jacqueline, Leon's daughter from a previous marriage, and two servants. Now the Russells got divorced in 1959, and Leon left the house and left for Oregon at some point. And so the people that were there the night that Paul Stine was murdered were Madeline, age 54, Alice, 22, Charles, 21, and Christine, 19. And again, the photographs are at different times and not at the age that it says they were. The ages are when the murder occurred. Now moving further down the street to Washington and Cherry at 3898 Washington, the occupants were the Van Haftens. And you had the father, Alexander, age 55, Sabelle, age 47, Catherine, age 20, Caroline, 18, Cindy, 16, Alex, 12, and Robert, age 8. And I believe he's the 8-year-old witness. And now as we move further down the street, heading west, we come to the end and we turn left and we come to an apartment. And there's 6 apartments in this building. And we come to Paul Von Hafften's place where he lived. And he's the younger brother of Alex. And he's the Zodiac Killer. He was a veteran and in the Army Air Force. He had emotional problems. He was an editor for his college newspaper. He couldn't get a job at the San Francisco Chronicle or Examiner. He visited the Napa and Santa Rosa area. And here's a look at Paul's registration card. And you can see that he was unemployed, living with his mother. And you can see his signature there. And then in the back of the card, you can see his height and his weight. And then here you can see that he enrolled in the Army in August 40 and worked at March Air Force in Riverside. And then he left the service in 1945. And then you can see here that he graduated from San Jose State College in 1948 with a degree in journalism. And then here you can see this newspaper and that he wrote one of these articles for the college paper. Now, Paul's father died on July 3rd, 1945, and his mother died in January of 1950, I guess while he was living with her. And then I wanted to show you that his brother who lived at that house was very successful, and he was involved in many organizations and was quite wealthy. On the other hand, while Paul was living in a small apartment down the street from his brother during the murder of Paul Stine. Now I misspoke earlier and in the previous video. Paul didn't live at that apartment at the time of Paul Stine's murder. I'm not sure where he lived. But how do I know he was there? Well, he worked at a polling place on October 21st, 1969, at 3653 Jackson. And here's a look at where that is in relationship to the crime scene. And that's 10 days after the crime. And here's his certificate of death. And he died on September 11th, 1978. And the last Zodiac letter was written on April 24th, 1978. Now going back to the corner of Washington and Maple at 3778 Washington, Mrs. Russell, who was very wealthy, was getting a divorce from her husband in 1958, and it was contentious. He didn't show up, and he lost pretty much everything. So there's some animosity there, and maybe that's something that could be involved in the Zodiac case. And here's her ex-husband's military registration card that he filled out, and you can see that he was 6'3" tall. Now looking at other people living in the house, you had Jacqueline, and I found this photograph of her in high school in San Bernardino, but I'm not 100% sure this is her. It's just someone with her name, or it's her. And then I looked at the two workers, Pia and Claire, and maybe they're possible boyfriends, and see if there's anything there. Now returning back to the Von Hafften family, Alex and Sabelle's children, here's a few articles about them just a few days after the murder of Paul Stine. And I wanted to mention Robert, the 8-year-old that possibly was a witness to seeing the Zodiac Killer. He was born on August 4th, 1961. And you can see in this FBI report about him identifying a man named Zeno L. Anthony, born according to this on February 28th, 1931, who resided at 3218 Jackson Street, just several blocks to the east of the crime scene and in the direction the Zodiac was traveling. And if he was in the top floor, he could see out to the park that night. And so we'll look into him this coming Sunday. And on this page of the report, it mentions a Robert Hale West, born on September 2nd, 1935, who was in the United States Marine Corps from 57 to 59. Well, this ends this episode of Unsolved, and this Sunday we'll have one good episode with these two new suspects. The man that the 8-year-old identified as a suspect, and Robert Hale West, R.H. West, with photographs and where they lived and other information about them. So I'll see you then.